Club NAIA Hoop Report Nation? It's your boy Manny here. Welcome to another edition of the Hoop Report, the NAIA Women's Basketball Podcast, episode 26. It's polls week, so you knew we were going to get to our top 25 receiving votes predictions episode this week. I mentioned that we were going to do it last episode that came out yesterday, but after talking with Lex and realizing that we had lots to deep dive in, I didn't want to rush either one of us. I figured it'd be a good idea just to make this a separate episode. And again, we owe you guys an episode for last week for us not being able to drop our midweek episode. So we'll have 3 episodes this week. We already had the Monday one. Hope you guys watched that. Hope you guys liked that one. Now we're going to have this one today on Tuesday to get ready for the polls on Wednesday. And then we'll still have our Thursday one like normal. Just like we do, like I said, it's polls week. So that means things are going to get a little interesting. Things are going to get a little exciting. I think these polls are going to be a very interesting just outcome. Again, the top is going to be the top and not too much to talk about there. And I'll give you guys a quick recap of the polls from last time. Again, this was from November 12th when they dropped. And a reminder, November 12th was when these polls came out. So November 11th, any games that happened on that Tuesday before did not affect those polls unless the committee, predicted them to happen or anything like that. So if you played on November 11th and you had a big win or you had a tough loss, don't be surprised that didn't really be reflected in the next polls that dropped on the 12th. Don't be surprised they're reflected on these polls to come back around, because I do think that probably was going to end up happening. Like I said, a quick recap of the polls from last time. Number 1, Dort. Number 2, Bethel. Number 3, Campbellsville. Marion's at 4. Dakota State's at 5. Freed-Hardeman's at 6. Lewis and Clark and St. Francis of Indiana were both tied for 7th. Briarcliff at 9. Langston wraps up the top 10. Then Concordia, Mid-America Nazarene, Indiana Wesleyan, Carroll, and Oregon Tech, 11 through 15. Number 16, Dakota Wesleyan. 17, Rocky Mountain. 18, St. Francis of Illinois. Cumberland of Kentucky, 19. Rio Grande, number 20. 21, 22, 23, 24, 25 are Montana Tech, Loyola, Indiana Tech, Lindsey Wilson, and Hastings. And then we'll get to our receiving votes at the end of the episode like we did last time. Prediction time. Going to get into it. I was pretty solid last time. Granted, it was one poll and it wasn't a lot to go off of. What I did for these polls, I only focused on the games from the 11th of November to the was Monday. Monday was going to be the 24th, so the 24th of November. Because again, Tuesday, so any games that happen today will not count toward the next polls unless the committee, hey, we're sure this team is going to win, or we're sure this team is going to lose, whatever that the case is. But in the rules aspect, if you will, I guess you can say, these games should not be counting towards these next polls that come out tomorrow. So between then and now, I talked about the record for these teams. The overall record, I did mention them, of course. I'm not looking at anything that happened before. I'm not looking at that hole, because once I start going down that rabbit hole of who played who, oh, this team played this, it's too much. It's too much for me, too much for y'all. No need for that. We're going to keep it short and sweet, focusing on the past 2 weeks of NAIA women's basketball action. Like I mentioned, Dort going to stay up top. They did have a little scare playing against Northwestern and that buzzer beater from Macy Severs that kept them at the number 1 spot. Shout out to Northwestern for giving the defenders a really tough test there at home. But Dort stays up top. Nothing to really talk about there. I do have Bethel and Campbellsville now sharing number 2, similar to how in the polls I just mentioned, it was, I believe, Lewis and Clark and St. Francis shared number 7. I would not be surprised if Bethel and Campbellsville are now sharing number 2 when the polls drop tomorrow morning, just because Bethel deserves to still be number 2 in the country, and I think Campbellsville is playing at that level, still undefeated as I'm recording this episode. This is going to be recorded Monday night. So there are some big games that are going to happen tomorrow on Tuesday when you guys are watching this. So tonight, I guess I should say, be mindful of that. I am not going to necessarily predict the winner in any of those, but I will talk about outcomes on how those games could affect the polls coming out Wednesday morning. Marion stays at number 4, undefeated team. Dakota State, I think, stays at number 5. Freed-Hardeman at number 6. However, if you do force me to pick, I think it might go Marion, Freed-Hardeman, Dakota State, just because Freed-Hardeman is undefeated and Dakota State is not. Granted, Dakota State only losses to Dort, so it's not a bad loss, but you got to credit the team that's undefeated, in my opinion, so I wouldn't be surprised if Freed-Hardeman jumps up to top 5. If they do that, we now have 3 Mid-South teams in the top 5. Wow. Lewis and Clark, you're dropping out of the top 10. I think that's a pretty safe assumption to make, especially after you dropped that game number 20 Rio Grande this past weekend. 1-1 since the last poll. So overall, I just think it's a tough way. If you win that one, you're staying number 7. You're going to stay in the top 10 at least. But I think losing that one and a lot of the other teams behind you getting some big wins and big upsets, I think is going to cause you to drop out of the top 10. Still top 25, still top 15, just in the outside of the top 10 now. St. Francis of Indiana, I think they take sole possession, obviously, of number 7 because of Lewis and Clark dropping out. So you can say they moved up. You can say they stay in the middle because last time they were number 8 and then they got up to number 7, even though they were sharing with Lewis and Clark. Now they'll be in sole possession of 7. So we'll see how the website reflects that. But they will be number 7 when the polls come out tomorrow. Briarcliff, I've got y'all moving up to 8, another undefeated team. The game versus Dakota Wesleyan will not count today. I want to reiterate it. That will not count. For the next polls, though, it would count if Briarcliff loses that one, or it will affect either one of these teams, obviously. But the game that happens tonight, I don't think Dakota Wesleyan will win. I do think it's gonna be a Briarcliff win, so I don't think the community is gonna predict a loss or anything like that or an upset. So I do have Briarcliff number 8. They've come a long way, and I think they should have been in this region from the beginning, to be honest with you. Langston moves into number 9, another undefeated team. Concordia moves into number 10, another undefeated team. Again, shout out to the Bulldogs and the season they've had so far. That's going to round out the top 10 from the previous polls into these polls. Again, pretty much same teams. Only thing different really is Lewis and Clark going to be dropping out. And I think you're going to have a new team coming in Langston to take their spot. And Concordia, honestly, could be looking at that one as well. Mid-American Nazarene. I think they're going to stay where they are. They were number 12. I think they stayed that 11 to 12 range. I don't think they're going to go too far away from that. 3-0 since the last polls. Only loss in the season was to Concordia, who is now above them and number in the top 10, or if not, right above them in the poll. So I think they're going to be able to stay in relatively safe distance. I would probably put money on 12, just keeping it there because, like I mentioned, I think Langston gets in the top 10 over Concordia. So then Concordia would stay at 11. But again, we'll see how the committee breaks it down. Indiana Wesleyan, I think they dropped close to number 20 now. They were number 13 the last time the polls came out. Since then, they're 1-2, 5-4 on the season. The 2 losses that they had in these past 2 weeks against number 17 Indiana Tech and unranked Taylor. Granted, I've heard, I've seen, I've talked about it. The injuries have been a thing, but that's just part of the game, and it's an unfortunate part of the game. We all hate the injuries, but the injury bug it needs to be taken into consideration. It will be taken into consideration. I do think it was taken into consideration in the last polls. Can you take it into consideration 2 polls in a row? I don't know, because remember, Indiana Wesleyan was number 10 the last polls in the first ones of the season, I guess you can say, and they only lost 13 spots. I kind of predicted that. I kind of thought they wouldn't go crazy, but now when you've looked at a 1-2 2 weeks, including an unranked loss, I don't think the ranked loss was gonna hurt. If it would have only been Indiana Tech, I'm comfortable in saying they'll fall, but they'll be like 15, maybe 16. But now with this unranked loss to Taylor, I think you're looking at maybe closer to 20 than people might be willing to admit. Maybe, and this is a strong maybe, outside the top 20. I don't like that. I don't think it's right, but I have to kind of do my job and do my due diligence of saying there's a world, like a legit world. If you told me to give you a percentage, I'd probably say 80-20 that they're not outside the top 20. But 20% is still a decent percent that I'll even go 85-15. But I just feel like there's a good chance with how the season's been going and the fact that you're only 1 game above 500 right now, that they could be outside of the top 20 altogether. Carroll, I think you stay within 1 spot, number 14, which is where they're at right now. 2-1 since the last polls. The only loss of the season was to number 17 Rocky Mountain. I do think big win for Carroll beating Bismarck, because Bismarck did beat Rocky Mountain. Again, I'm not going to try and go deep dive into the who beat who stuff, but considering these 3 teams are in the same conference, very easy to talk about and very easy to kind of break down. Again, Carroll beating Bismarck, even though it was only by 4 points, is a big win for Carroll's resume because of the Rocky Mountain loss that they had. Kind of, not going to say it cancels it out, but it does help, again, for the committee's sake of saying, it's worse that Rocky Mountain lost than that Carroll lost to Rocky Mountain. So I think that's going to help them maybe sneak in 1 spot, but I do think at least staying at number 14 is a fair assumption to make for Carroll. Oregon Tech, they're playing for the top 20 lives right now. Coming into today, number 15 in the country, but that could change by tomorrow morning. 1-2 since the last polls. Their losses were to number 17 Patriots, so that's an upset that's going to go against them, and the number 6 Freed Hardeman. Not a bad loss, but now you've got talking about 2 ranked losses instead of 1. Would have been a lot better if it was just the one Freed Hardman, who's probably gonna be top 5, maybe when the polls come out. But now you're talking about a must-win game for not just them, but Lindsey Wilson, which we'll get to later in this episode. Big game for them playing tomorrow, meaning for me, it's tomorrow. For y'all, it's already happened on Monday, last night. If Oregon Tech wins, been talking about in the future for me, if Oregon Tech does win, I think it allows the Owls to stay in the top 20 picture. Now, we're in the top 20. I won't be surprised if they're exactly at 20. Like, I'm not saying they're going to be comfortably at, they're not staying at 15, and they're not moving up. Their range is to be from 15 to 20 with a win against Lindsey Wilson. If Oregon Tech loses, we're now talking about them possibly drop. If I said Indiana Wesleyan could possibly drop out of the top 20, like an 85 to 15 odds, an Oregon Tech loss now puts you at 1-3 since the last polls came out. 2 losses to teams that are beneath you, and by a couple spots, not like it's a 15-16, it's a 15-19, and then a 15-24. That's got to put you in jeopardy of being out of the top 25. Again, in terms of prediction and percentages, I hate to admit it, but I'm looking at a 75-25 that you're out of the top 25. I am. Maybe, you know what? I'll flip that. 25-25 that you stay in the top 25. Again, with the loss. But my gut is telling me it could be even like 50-50. Like, that's how I do think it's going to matter who or what the score is. I think that's going to be a very important factor to take into account there. I think it's going to be a very important factor on where the game is at. I'm pretty sure it's going to be at Lindsey Wilson, which doesn't really, I mean, it helps Oregon Tech, actually, I should say. I shouldn't say that. It does help Oregon Tech a lot. So that's going to definitely play a factor into it. It's a big matchup for both teams. It's a big matchup for both teams. I'm excited to watch that one and take that one in because, again, big matchup in terms of top 25 ranking possibilities and outcomes for Wednesday. Dakota Wesleyan, I see you dropping closer to the top 20, maybe past 20. You're already at 16. Since the last post came out, you are 2-1, 4-2 in the season, but the loss comes at the hand of number 25, Hastings, who is, again, just on the edge of the top 25 picture by 4 at Hastings. The blowout win by Morningside could keep them above 20. That's why I said you drop closer to 20. And then I said that maybe outside of the top 20, it's a receiving votes win. And it's a team that you're supposed to beat. So I don't really know if that's going to sway the committee, if anything. I'm just kind of putting it on there to doing my due diligence of letting them know, like, hey, they did have a good win, but it wasn't going to be, it's not a top 25 win. It's not a win that's anybody above you. It's a team you're supposed to handle, just like you're supposed to handle Hastings. So there's a world where Dakota Wesleyan does drop out of the top 20, especially with some of these teams below them, like a Rio Grande, a Cumberland's, even some of the receiving votes teams that we're going to get to in a minute here. What does help Dakota Wesleyan is when we get to them right now in Rocky Mountain and Montana Tech and Loyola, those teams are going to definitely be in jeopardy. If not, some of them, I have them outside the top 25 altogether. So Dakota Wesleyan can benefit from everybody else around them not having a great 2 weeks. We will see when Wednesday does come. Speaking of Rocky Mountain, they're my unknowns. They're my unknowns because number 17, y'all could be outside the top 25. Y'all really could. And I don't think, again, it's not a hot take. I don't think it's anything crazy to say. If we're talking percentages, I'd be betting on you being outside the top 25 more than I would be betting on you staying top 20. So there's 3 outcomes. You stay top 20, which I don't think, I do not believe that's going to happen. You stay top 25, it's a realistic possibility. We'll go over the resume in a minute here. Or you fall out of the top 25. I'm leaning towards outside the top 25 because you're 2-1 since the last polls. You're 3-1 overall in the season. So the record's fine. But the loss to unranked Bismarck by 4, I believe it was by 4. That hurts. If Bismarck had beaten number 14 Carroll, now I would be saying Rocky Mountain State top 25 because Bismarck just won 2 top 20 games. That's going to help their resume. Now, it'll obviously still hurt Carroll and Rocky Mountain, but for Rocky Mountain's sake, I'm sure they were Bismarck fans when they were playing Carroll, and there was a chance that Bismarck could win that game. Like, Bismarck might mess around and be in a receiving votes picture in a couple, depending on how the rest of the frontier goes for them if they keep doing what they've been doing. At the end, Rocky Mountain it's definitely going to be top 20 is the best case scenario. If you get a number 20 next to your name by Wednesday morning, someone above likes you. I'm being honest with you guys. I think losing that game hurts you, and it should drop you significantly in the rankings. Top 20 is best case scenario. For me, I think it's going to be outside the top 25. I do think it'll be in the receiving votes picture. Like, I don't think you're going to drop all the way out of everything, but there has to be some type of repercussion for losing that game. Nothing against Bismarck, nothing against the team, the program. Great win by them. They did what they're supposed to do by being the underdogs and proving that they need to be talked about a little bit more, at least in the frontier side of things. But Rocky Mountain, again, an unknown because there is a legit world 33% across the board. 33% across the board that they say top 20 in the top 25 picture or outside top 25. I'm going to go that last percentage point. I'm giving it the top 25 outside. So that's where I'm going to go with Rocky Mountain in my predictions. St. Francis of Illinois, they could be the second biggest jump from this polls. I see them going from number 18 to 11, 13 range. I think that's where they can go. They're 4-0 since the last polls. They're undefeated in the season. These are their 4 games that I talked about in the 4-0 in these past 2 weeks. They beat their opponents by 40, by 11, and by 30. That's including a win over Governor State, receiving votes Governor State. So they've done what they need to do. They've dominated their opponents. They've been one of the best teams in the country. Again, one of the last undefeated teams left. They got to move up a little bit higher. I need them at least top 15. That's non-negotiable. Give me 11, 13 range. I think that's appropriate for this St. Francis team. Cumberland's of Kentucky moves up no higher than 15. Right now they're 19. I go 15 because you're 2-1 in these last 2 weeks, 8-1 on the season. We know where you started. You started literally number 25, moved up to number 19. It's a good start. Your only loss this year, this week, these past 2 weeks was to Marion at Marion. Trust me, I've been there. I know how it can be. Nothing against you in that loss. Bad loss in the sense of the score, obviously, but it's number 4 in the country at their place. But that upset against Oregon Tech at home really helped, and that's why I'm bumping you up to 15 at the no higher end. Like, that's the highest end. More realistically, probably looking at about a 17, 18 range, especially with Rocky Mountain not doing so hot and St. Francis moving up a little bit higher. So I do think that's a more realistic range, but I don't think 15 is out of the question. Just best case scenario if I was a Patriots fan. Heading to the back end of the top 25 picture, Rio Grande, biggest jump for me in the polls, going from 20 to that 12 or 13 range. I just feel like you're 4-0 since the last polls. You're undefeated when the last one undefeated teams left. You've got a win over Governor State, and you've got that big upset win against number 7 Lewis and Clark State this past weekend. Even though it was at your place, that still does not matter. I've never been that high or that low on at home versus on the road. I do think obviously on the road matters way more than at homes. But at the end, a win is a win, and an upset win is an upset win. So I'm going to give Rio Grande that biggest jump title for these polls, especially because the closest game of this season was Lewis and Clark State by 8. Everything else has been double digits. Everything else has been blowouts. Everything else has been Red Storm dominated. So I do think they're going to be getting some respect in these next polls, as they should, rightfully so. Montana Tech, you're dropping out of the top 25. You're receiving votes. You were like before. You got to the top 25 in the next poll. So I'm not saying same thing with Rocky Mountain. If Rocky Mountain does go out of the top 25, like I do think Montana Tech will, I don't think it's the end of the season. It's only the third polls. You could do a lot between these polls and the next 2 polls, as we've seen 2 weeks can change a lot. So both these teams have plenty of chances to be back in the top 25 picture when it's all said and done. For Montana Tech, though, like I mentioned, outside the top 25, 1-1 since the last polls, 5-1 on the season. So record-wise overall, not bad. 2 weeks, 1-1. I mean, you've only played 2 games. You only played 2 games. The problem is that loss, unranked Valley City on the road by 3. It's going to hurt you. It's going to hurt you, and you cannot be surprised when the committee comes out and says, we think that was a really bad loss, and we're going to have to dock you a position, especially because you were already receiving votes before these polls. So you made a heck of a jump, obviously. That's a very impressive jump to go from receiving votes in the middle of the pack, I believe they were, to, I wouldn't say comfortably, but in the top 25 picture. You didn't make it 25, 24. You were in there. The same breath, one bad loss, you're dropping back out. And that's kind of what I think is the situation going on right now. And that's why I feel like they're going to be outside of the top 25 picture. Loyola, another one. You were receiving votes before. One ranked loss, 2 receiving votes of William Carey on the road, I think is going to drop you out of the top 25. Now, out of these 2 teams, I would say Loyola has a better chance of staying in the top 25 picture, even if it is, they'd still drop. Like, I don't think Loyola, best case scenario, they stay in the top 25. more realistically, they'll be outside of the top 25. But if they stay, you're looking at 24, 25. You're not looking at even 23. Like, I think you got to drop. Honestly, I'd say 25. I just think that that's a realistic and safe assumption to make because you were 2-1. And at least in your loss, it was to a ranked opponent, a receiving votes team. And it wasn't an unranked opponent like it was for Montana Tech. So Loyola, I'm also saying you'd be outside the top 25, but I'm safer in betting. I feel safer saying they would stay compared to a Montana Tech in these next polls. Indiana Tech, I've got you guys with the third largest jump because I said I had Rio Grande with number 1 for sure, and then there was another one, St. Francis. You were third because that'll be a 5-step. So yeah, so I just had St. Francis with the third, and St. Francis from Illinois. I should clarify, and then I've got Indiana Tech with the second highest jump. 3-1. I'm counting. Yeah, I'm gonna say it. I'm counting the Indiana Wesleyan win in these polls. I'm counting them in these polls because technically it happened on Tuesday before the last polls came out. So I'm going to stick with that ruling, I guess you can say. I'm not going to dock them. I'm not going to say, oh, that happened in the last polls. No, that is for these polls. So as far as I'm concerned, Indiana Tech in the past 2 weeks are 3-1, 4-2 on the season. Their only loss in these past 2 weeks was to number 7 St. Francis, and then they beat IWU at home. At the time, IWU was number 10 in the country, obviously. That's a big win. It's a big win. I think they can go from number 23 to number 17. I think that's a very safe assumption to make. I was not surprised. I think I was surprised. I was shocked, maybe is the word, when they dropped all the way to number 23 from 17. So I just think they're going to go back to where they were. I don't think they're going to necessarily do anything crazier than that. And again, because that range, we're talking about the Rocky Mountain, we're talking about Oregon Tech, we're talking about Dakota Wesleyan. Like, those 3 teams are the teams that I feel like in the teens are in jeopardy of moving the most and the lowest. So I think Indiana Tech can slot right into one of those spots. And then even if St. Francis moving up, you've now opened up 15, 16, 17, and 18. So you've got 4 spots there. I think they're going to be able to take one of those 4 spots, and rightfully so. Lindsey Wilson playing for their top 25 lives. I mentioned Oregon Tech is playing for top 20, in parentheses 25. Lindsey Wilson's playing for your top 25 because you were number 24 in the first polls. You stayed number 24 in the last polls because of that loss to GGC. I truly believe that's why you stayed there. You're 3-1 since the last polls came out, 6-2 on the season overall. Only loss so far was to an unranked UT Southern team, who I do believe will be in the receiving votes picture when we get to that point in the episode. And it was at your place. So you need this win. In my opinion, you need this win more than Oregon Tech does. If Oregon Tech takes that win, you're for sure outside the top 25, but you'll be in the receiving votes picture. You're still one of the best teams in the country, and I do believe that is going to be the case. A win over Oregon Tech gives you the best case to not only stay, you could move up a little bit. I get it. The unranked loss is not a good look, but considering the fact that UT Southern will be a receiving votes team, I'm confident in saying that. Now you're looking at, okay, well, you lost to a team who is in the receiving votes picture, and then you turn around and beat Oregon Tech, who was number 15 at the time, who is also playing for their lives. Like, I do believe the committee will take that into consideration. I believe they will look at it and say, okay, you've got 2 teams, both know, they both know that they're in jeopardy of falling out of the top 25. They need this win. Both teams do. This is not a situation where Oregon Tech doesn't know, and Lindsey Wilson's like, maybe not. No, they both know their backs are against the wall. This is a playoff level game right now because of what it means for their rankings and for at-large bids and for resumes and all that kind of stuff in the back end. Especially for Lindsey Wilson, where if they can get in the top 15 by the time the Mid-South Conference play starts, that's a big win for them. It's a big win for them. So this is going to be an interesting game. It's a really good game. I'm very excited to watch this game, like I mentioned earlier. Again, Lindsey Wilson wins, they may even move up into the top 20. That's how much of a win that would be. They lose, they're outside the top 25, and that's not a crazy thing to say. I think it's a very honest answer. Last team, Hastings. I think they're going to be kind of like Indiana Tech and get back to where they were in the previous polls. Obviously, they were 12 before, and they're 25 now. I think they get back not as high as 12, but they're my under the radar jump team where they could see a 10 spot jump into that 15 range. 2-1 since the last polls. The only loss was to Dort. So again, you might as well have been 2-0 in my book. 4-3 on the season so far. The win was against number 16 Dakota Wesleyan. When that's why I say You beat a team 9 spots above you by 4. That's garnering a nice little jump, nice little tick in your number. And so I think that's where that high jump comes from. The extra 2 notches or the extra notch is because, again, that range is already in question and it is rocky and it is shaky for all those teams in there. So I do think Hastings will be a team that kind of takes that spot or close to those spots in these next polls. Overall, there's a possibility of at lowest 3 teams dropping out of the top 25. At most, you could be looking at 6 teams, y'all. And again, it's my job to be a little spicy. It's my job to be kind of talking about worst case scenarios for some of these teams. But that's why I love my job. It's fun. In reality, if you force me to pick between the numbers of 3 to 6, I would lean 4. I think 4 is a good number. I think that's a safe bet. 6, the odds of that happening, 80 to 20, it doesn't happen. Maybe 88 to 22. I mean, 88 to 12. Maybe 88 to 12. It doesn't happen. I do think 6 is like, if that happens, I'm more so just kind of spitballing and thinking out loud. I do believe 3 to 4 is the safer bet. But if 6 teams do drop out, hey, y'all, the committee ain't playing around this year. Now we're going to head over to the receiving votes side of things, and we will wrap up this episode and send you guys into the Wednesday morning, and excited to see what the committee does come up with. To refresh everybody's memories at home, Governor State was the first team receiving votes, then LSU Shreveport, Providence, Southeastern, Georgetown, Southern Oregon, Corbin, Friends, Florida Memorial, Huntington, Columbia, Evangel, Grandview, Morningside, William Carey, Cumberlands of Tennessee, Xavier, and Shawnee State was the last team. Starting with number 1, Governor State, I think you're outside of the receiving votes picture. You were very close to being in the top 25. I think if you have a good 2 weeks, you get in the top 25. But since those last polls came out that I just read, you're 2-3, so you're below 500. Your overall record is 5-3. Your 2 wins were against unranked opponents, so they're not really going to help you. You lose to number 18 St. Francis at home. It's fine. I'm not going to count that against you too much. But then you turn around and lose number 20 Rio Grande. That one's going to hurt a little bit more because it's 2 ranked losses now. And then you lose to receiving votes Shawnee State on the road as well. I think it's just a matter of too many losses at once. If you go 3-2 and one of those losses you got to get one of those top 25 wins, and I'm including Shawnee State in that one. If you get the Shawnee State one, I think the committee gives you a pass for the weeks, and you stay in the receiving votes picture. Dropping out is a little bit excessive. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, you were number 78 total votes in the last polls. Shawnee State had 5 to give you the range. So you were comfortably in there. I may be going worst case scenario, but I do think they're going to drop a good amount in the receiving votes picture just because I think you have to. That Shawnee State one, I think, hurts the most. That one was the backbreaker. The other 2 you could live with, but that Shawnee State one was a backbreaker. It was a backbreaker. LSU Shreveport, then they dropped a little bit in the receiving votes picture, 2-1 since the last polls, 5-2 on the season. You beat an unranked team, but then you lost to unranked Mid-American Christian. It's going to hurt your standing for sure in the big picture scheme of things. Providence, I think you're dropping out of the receiving votes picture as well. 1-2, so below 500, 4-2 on the season. You lost to unranked MSU Northern and number 5 Dakota State, and your win was an unranked win. Again, you could have lived with the Dakota State loss. Can't live with the unranked MSU Northern loss. Southeastern, I think they're going to be in the top 25. One of the most dominant teams in the country right now. 4-0 since the last polls, 8-0 in the season. They have been beating teams handedly all year except for 2 games. They beat receiving votes from Florida Memorial at Florida Memorial. And they only 2 games this season have been under 15 points. Not 10, not 8, not 12, 15 points. And I'm going to be honest with y'all, it could have been under 20, but I couldn't do math, if I'm being honest. It was too many numbers, and I wanted to get this video done for the night. But there's a world where I could have sat here and said, Southeastern has not beaten a team by less than 20 points all but 2 times. Just to put in perspective the dominance that they've had. Now, we're in the top 25. I think they stay outside the top 20. 20 would be the best case scenario, and I don't think that's going to happen. I think 25 to 23 is the range, but we will see, and I do believe there will be a number next to their name when it's all said and done on Wednesday. Georgetown, I think they move into number 20 into the top 25 as well. 3-0 since the last post, 10-0 in the season. So now you're double digits undefeated. Some of the teams, even in the top 25, don't even have those many wins just yet. Closest game this season for them, 27. 27 points is the closest that anybody's been to beating Georgetown College. You got to be in there. If I'm giving Southeastern that nod, you got to get in there, and you got to be above Southeastern. That's just how it works. Southern Oregon moves in the top of the receiving votes picture, 3-0 since the last polls, 4-3. They do have a game, or they had a game against Hope. If Southern Oregon wins that game, or won that game, I should say, they'll be on the edge of the receiving votes top 25 picture. In that where Governor State, LSU, Shreveport, and Providence are right now, if you go to the websites. If they lose that, more minimal movement, if any, because that's an unranked loss. Hope there was receiving votes at the beginning of the year, so it's not a bad loss per se, but I do think that that loss will hurt the momentum they built going into Wednesday morning. Corbin, I think you stay. Friends, I think you stay. For Corbin, 3-0 since the last poll, 6-0 in the season. No ranked opponents in these last 2 weeks, so that's kind of why I feel like they're going to stay. And for Friends, 2-1 since the last poll, 6-1 in the season. You did lose to receiving votes of Evangel, so I have to dock a little bit for movement potential there. Huntington, I think outside the top out of the receiving votes picture, 1-1 since the last polls. The loss came to an unranked Spring Arbor team on the road. I think Huntington's had a really up and down season. Again, you lost to some top 25 team in the beginning of the year, then you beat a top 25 team later in those weeks, but now you're losing to unranked teams. It's been all over the place, to be honest with you guys, but I think this is the point in the season where the committee says we got to do something about it, just because it's time. Some of these teams are winning more important games. Some of these teams are having better seasons right now. We got to do something about it. I think Huntington will be back in the receiving votes picture, especially with some crossroads wins. But for right now, I do think they'll be outside looking in for these next 2 weeks. Columbia moves to the top end of the receiving votes picture, in my opinion. 2-0 since the last polls, 5-0 in the season. Just no ranked opponents right now. It's really what's been hurting them. They've only had one ranked opponent, I believe, and it was a receiving votes team, so it wasn't even a top 25 team. So that's kind of where I'm at with Columbia. Evangel, they move into the top end of the receiving votes picture as well. They were with 13 votes. I think they get over 25, 30 votes in these next polls. 3-0 since the last polls, 5-1 in the season. They beat receiving votes Friends on the road, and Friends had more votes than they did in the last polls at 37. So I think that's going to bump them up. And another team that's been dominating everybody. I think their most recent game in conference, I think, was against Tabor. That one was the closest one they had. It was under single digits. I do remember that. But other than that, every game's been a blowout, and they're putting up almost 100 a game. So I think Evangel's going to be not top 25, but edge of the receiving votes picture. Grandview, I think they get more votes than last time. They were at where are you, Grandview? Number 12, so right below or right behind Evangel. I think you're looking at 20 at least. It's good for another 8 votes. And then from there, we'll see what the committee decides. 3-0 since the last poll, 6-3 on the season. No ranked opponents again. So kind of that's what's hindering them if there's minimal movement for them. Going to wrap it up here in these next few moments. Morningside, I think you're dropping out of the receiving votes picture. 2-2 since the last polls, 5-2 on the season. You lost to number 16 Dakota Wesleyan, and then you lose to an unranked Mount Murray team at home. Yeah, no, the committee's we're not gonna like that one. You already had 11 votes last time. That's gonna hurt. That's gonna hurt for sure. So I think they'll be out the receiving votes picture. William Carey moves to the top end of the receiving votes picture. 3-0, 6-0 in the season. Beat number 22 Loyola at home. That's gonna be a big win. It's gonna bump them significantly into 20, 25. Now, you guys had 10 votes. Yeah, you guys had 10 votes last time, so I'll give you another 10 at least. So about 20 votes this time around in the polls. Xavier drops out of the top 25 out of the receiving votes picture. 1-2, 3-2 in the season. You lost to unranked Life on the road, and then you lost to unranked Mobile at home. Not much I need to really explain or harp on there. Last team, Shawnee State. I think they are now moved comfortably in the receiving votes picture. They don't move to the top. They only had 5 votes last time, so anything double digits will be amazing, and that's kind of what I'm looking at here. I'm looking at them being in that 13 to 12 range that Evangel and Grandview were the last polls. 4-1 in the last 2 weeks, 5-2 in the season. You beat Governor State, who's receiving votes. It was a neutral site game, but I got to mention that. And then you lost to number 7 Lewis and Clark State by 1 at that neutral site as well. So I do think the committee looks at that and says, you know what, we're going to give them a couple extra votes for sure. Last thing I have here before I send you guys into your rest of your Tuesday and into Wednesday morning, teams to keep an eye on in the receiving votes picture. I got 5 teams here. I'm going to throw in one that I didn't write down, but I do kind of want to mention them. Taylor, that was a big win against Indiana Wesleyan. How much the committee puts stock into Indiana Wesleyan right now will determine if Taylor gets into the receiving votes picture, even if it's only like 3 votes, whatever it is. But just want to mention their name because that was a big win in the Crossroads. I'm looking at, for sure, confident, put money on it, UT Southern. UT Southern, I think they've done enough. They beat Cumberland to Tennessee. They've won some other very impressive games, so I'm giving them that nod. Mount Mary, can you get in with one receiving votes win? I don't know, but again, want to talk about them, about the potential they have there. Spring Arbor, they're another team that I would probably put a little bit more money on than Mount Mary. MSU Northern, another team that's sneakily making a little bit of a resume, especially in the Frontier. And then Mid-American Christian, just because they've been there before. They had some nice wins this past week. I think they could have a solid argument to be in the receiving votes picture when the polls do come out. Again, to wrap it up, UT Southern I'm confident in. Spring Arbor, I'm less but strong confident in. And then Mount Mary, MSU Northern, and MACU, kind of a toss-up. Maybe the MSU a little bit less of a toss-up, more of a good solid throw than the other two. But that's going to do it for this episode. As we predicted, the top 25 and the receiving votes pictures. What do you guys like? Do you think I'm going crazy? Do you think I didn't go crazy enough? Let us know down below. Let us know in the comments. Let us know on our socials if you feel like where your team is going to end up, and or if you think any of these other teams should move higher or lower in the polls. Thanksgiving week, I said it last episode. I'm going to say it this episode again. We're thankful for you guys for tuning in every week or following us on the socials, for interacting with us online. We really appreciate it. We love what we're doing. We think it's been going great. Definitely always looking for improvement, and we're going to keep improving, but you guys have done a very good job, and we are more than thankful. We could not be more thankful for how much of the appreciation you guys have given us and shown us in every facet and every possible way you could support a jumpstart, a revival of a brand. But we will catch you guys in the later episode on Thursday. Until then, I'll see y'all there.